Just wanted to thank Jasper and Claudia and everyone in the London team who extended the invitation to speak to you today about my work and about Metropolis Abstracted. I was really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak about this series in particular because it's probably not the most obvious selection. I have a very broad range of work, architectural, cityscape, and it's a 20-year career. So this is one of the latest series and really the deepest foray into abstraction. So I really appreciate that you were interested in this series. By the end of the presentation, I want to give you some insight into what it takes to create a series like Metropolis Abstracted. It's quite a commitment of time and many hours of shooting, editing, trial and error, and multiple iterations for each addition to the series. I also want to point out that I've taken much inspiration from the brilliant work of architects and designers, not only for this series, but over my entire career. This series builds on that and takes it to a new place. I've endeavored to make my presentation as entertaining as possible with lots of visuals for you. I'm going to turn off my own video now so that you can focus on the slides. Let me see here. Let's stop my video. All right. Let's move forward here. So just a bit of introduction about myself. 2024 is my 20th year as a professional photographer. I went pro in 2004. I was an avid amateur photographer for a decade before that. My last full-time job was in 2003 in advertising at an agency called Digitas. I don't know if that's still in existence, maybe. The first 8 years of my career was divided between shooting for commercial clients such as ad agencies and property developers. And during that time, I also shot my own fine art and sold that as prints. I'm just going to wait for the slides to catch up here. So interesting fact, I've been selling my fine art photography since the beginning, since 2004, to customers across the USA and around the world. Photographers often ask me, how did you do it? How did you make a go of it from the beginning? The answer is that I was fortunate. I leveraged the power of the internet. I was an early adopter of the internet, e-commerce, and especially search in my business. I was very fortunate that I had the ability to do that. I had the technical skills to do that. And I was fully set up online from 2004 and operating. That gave me a huge start as a photographer. To date, I've sold artwork to customers in 21 countries and 6 continents. I'm still waiting for Antarctica, so if any of you have a lead for sale to Antarctica, please let me know in the comments. I just wanted to point out here that my work has been included in several museum exhibitions. I'm not going to redo this list because I want to get through the more interesting slides, but you could reference this on my website. There's the corporate collections, the art collections page, which shows, and the exhibitions page, which shows the museum exhibitions and the corporate collections. All righty. Probably more interesting to you all, I just wanted to show you a few screens from my website. I know that you have offices around the world in many locations where I've done extensive shooting. This is New York. All of these places live on their own section in my website. The website is divided thematically by genre, so architecture, cityscapes, landscapes, and also by location. So New York, London, Dubai, they all have their own section on my website. They kind of function as websites within websites. So please do check it out. I'm focusing here more on the architectural photography. The New York section is probably the biggest because I've been shooting New York for 30 years now. This is UAE. So you'll find a lot of images from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, all over the UAE. That is probably the second largest. It's competing now with London, I'm not sure. But you could see here some natural, I threw in some natural landscapes just for you to have an idea. These are desert landscapes from Liwa in Abu Dhabi. This is London. I was really fortunate to be able to spend quite a bit of time in London at the end of 2022. I was telling Jasper that I had reacquainted myself with the city after being away a long time. I hadn't been back in London for years. And I was just completely shocked at the level of development, how it had changed, and what a spectacular city it is. I mean, culturally, and it's a visual spectacle as well. I mean, I just loved it. I mean, there isn't any place in Europe that is not spectacular, but I think because I had been away for so long, I really just found it a joy. And I was telling Jasper, it's also much quieter than New York, so it's that was nice as well. I spent 16 days shooting continuously in London. I tend to work that way because I like to stay focused and not really put a lot of breaks in between. I shot by night and by day. So you could see the nighttime. Okay, this is heavily focused on architecture for you. So the London collection spawned two entirely new series, which came after Metropolis Abstracted. I tend to work in series, which you'll see. They're called Flux and Multiplicity. Please do check it out when you have a chance on my website. So now we're going to get to the heart of the matter. What is Metropolis Abstracted? So Metropolis Abstracted is a series of large-scale abstract photographs incorporating architectural details and close-up views of architectural elements, such as building facades and reflections. I consider it to be an abstract photography series primarily, and an architectural photography series tangentially. It's a 100% lens-based series, meaning that it was produced the good old-fashioned way with a camera and lenses. There is no CGI, no rendering, no compositing of images, and no generative AI utilized in the series whatsoever. I just want to repeat that. There's no AI whatsoever in this series. This is a lens-based series. The images are intended to be viewed as large-scale photographs, which draw the viewer into the composition and hold their attention. So the origin of the series, this is rather interesting. I started working on Metropolis Abstracted in May of 2020, during the height of the pandemic. It started as a creative challenge, basically to myself, to shoot new work while I had extra time on my hands, as business was quite slow during the pandemic, and to stay creatively engaged at that time. I had wanted to attempt a purely abstract series for years, and the pandemic presented me with the time and the opportunity to do that. This series can be seen as a progression from an earlier series, which was called Gary's Children, which also touched on abstraction. Just a bit about Gary's Children. It's a series I completed in 2011. It basically deconstructs one of Frank Gehry's buildings in Seattle, which is the Museum of Pop Culture, also known as MoPop. The building is broken down into component parts, and I isolated the sections which I found most visually interesting. I found the materiality of this building fascinating, to borrow a term that you architects like to use. I love the iridescent color transitions and the mixture of textures. But again, the reason I mentioned this series is because it was really kind of my first foray into abstraction. Gary's Children won numerous awards, including a silver medal at the Prix de la Photographie in Paris. The series was also published in many publications, including, you can see here, Design Boom. Once it got published in Design Boom, it kind of went ballistic, and a lot of publications picked it up, and it really got seen all over the world. So the apogee of this series comes in 2016, when I was contacted by a museum in Tokyo, 2121 Design Site Museum Tokyo. They were mounting a retrospective for architect Frank Gehry, and they requested that the series be included in the exhibition. Of course, I was over the moon to be included in a Gehry retrospective. I only found out much later from the curator that I was working with that the request had come directly from Gehry Partners in Los Angeles. So I thought that was kind of cool. So now, having seen the precursor to the series, let's turn back to Metropolis Abstracted, and specifically to the element of surprise, which is crucial to this series. So the element of surprise is an important, if unintended, feature of this series, which I really only came to discover after I was deeply involved in creating it. Metropolis Abstracted is based on highly composed static images, but the process of mirroring the image reveals complex relationships and a symbolism that's perceived by the viewer. Eli Anipur at Wide Walls magazine stated it much better than I could in an article about the series, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit here. She said, continuing the work started with his previous series, Gary's Children, Prokos delves deeper into the possibilities of the medium, exploring its confines and boundaries and his personal vision in order to present a body of work that's a step further into abstraction and inner expression. The result is a captivating combination of color, movement, and light that is difficult to classify within existing genres. Abstract and intimate, but also created from existing and observable elements surrounding us, Prokos's recent series emerges as contemporary experimental art that combines genres, techniques, and technological possibilities into singular pieces showing a personal sentiment, end quote. I include that quote not only because I found it well written, but because I really enjoyed her observations about the series. In the course of working on the series, I realized that the observer could project whatever they wanted onto each image. Each person can see something different. Some people find specific images disquieting or enigmatic or even spiritual in nature. The unintentional psychological element to this series can be considered a happy accident and a part of the discovery process in its creation. It's also due to the scale of the photographs, up to 80 inches at height or width, which draws the viewer in and allows them to become immersed in the images. So now we're at the video portion of I include a video from the Exposure International Photo Festival. This series was part of a solo exhibition I had there, which was called New Abstraction. It was a bifurcated series. It included, you could see here, another series called Inverted, which was completed in the United Arab Emirates. And so half of the gallery was Inverted, the other half was Metropolis Abstracted, which was pretty cool. So I'm going to have to change the audio settings to play this. So let me just work on that. You will stop hearing me completely. You'll hear the video, and then I'll turn my own audio back on. Hopefully this will work. If not, then we'll have to skip the video. Oh, and I'm going to shuttle through this as well. Oh, no, go back.
Hi, I'm with Andrew Prokos today, and we're at your exhibition. And Andrew's going to tell us about your fabulous artwork here. So why don't you just lead us in, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're exhibiting.
So my name is Andrew Prokos, and I'm an architectural and fine art photographer from New York City. And my exhibition here is called New Abstraction, and I'll welcome you to come take a look.
Perfect. Before we go in, Andrew, can you
Just go.
start by telling me about this beautiful
I'll put it here too.
It's architecture.
abstraction?
Right. So
this is a completely different concept.
Well, this series is entitled Metropolis Abstracted.
Yeah.
This is a newer series. It's from 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
And these are primarily produced in the United States. Most of these at this point are from New York, but also Boston. And this focuses completely on contemporary architecture. So the latest architecture, and it's taking it from a different perspective in terms of it's not inverting the image, but it's abstracting close-ups of architectural details. So I'm taking the image, I'm hunting for images in the city, I'm looking for things that I think might work, taking very precise close-up images and then mirroring them in different ways. And the mirroring process, it's a very process-oriented series. The mirroring process reveals a certain geometry and a certain, what happens is it has an inherent symbolism that it kind of reveals. I like this series, and I can't say that I could take credit for every aspect of it, in that this series has the element of surprise, because you don't know until the end what it's going to reveal, what it's going to look like, and you don't know what people are going to interpret the image as.
Yeah.
So the final aspect of this is every person will see the image and they'll interpret it in a different way. Some people are seeing faces, some people are seeing, like this one, samurai helmets.
Yes.
Some people, you know, get a spiritual vibe from this one. This one I personally see as being very New York, even though it's contemporary architecture. It harkens back to Art Deco very strongly, because this motif was very common in Art Deco in New York. They're dynamic, and they kind of radiate a certain energy, which is very, very interesting. So,
do you like that people wouldn't be able to identify where it came from?
yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Has anyone come up and go, I know where that was?
No.
No.
No, not even in inverted, which I think to me is probably more easily identifiable.
Yeah.
Sheikh Zayed Road, people realize that it's Sheikh Zayed Road, but with this series, Metropolis Abstracted, they have no idea what they're looking at.
Right.
A lot of people have been saying, and it's interesting, that they think that they look like paintings, that it's very painterly,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily even identifiable as being an architectural based series. And you know, my response to that is the architecture is not really the focus of this series. It's just the building block. So it's just the first input into the series before you get the final product. This one is in New York City in Hudson Yards. People would never imagine what this is. This is actually an inflated balloon-like structure that exists in Hudson Yards, that they have concerts and things like that, and they open and close it in different seasons. And so you can see here that it's got these puffy, you know, right, rounded corners with lines. It's actually because it's an inflated structure. So I took a kind of a skewed picture of it, and this is what emerged in the end. This one has more of a dancing, dynamic kind of feeling. This one is Boston. This is architecture from Frank Gehry, actually in Boston at MIT. And this is just playing with reflecting the windows in his building. One thing I should point out, people think that this is montage, and it's not montage. All of these photos originate in one image. They are all based on one image. This one is one image that's reflected on itself, so it could be reflected you know, vertically, it could be reflected horizontally and numerous times, but there are not separate images being used. Only one image per photo.
Only one. Yeah.
So this one is also Hudson Yards. This is New York. I'm very partial to this one. This one is maybe one of the quieter images in the series, but I like it because I said before, it reminds me of classic Art Deco. It has nothing in reality to do with Deco. It doesn't come from that time period. But this shape,
it's what it reminds.
This shape reminds me completely of New York, and I have a good association with that.
So you were saying, so you're an amateur.
Okay, let me just put my own audio back on. Okay, so that's basically the part of the video that that pertains to Metropolis Abstracted. Can everybody hear me again? Because I've switched my audio away from the video. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Ah, good. All right. So now we've come to the part of the presentation, the big reveal. So this part of the presentation, some of the concepts I've mentioned previously are going to become a bit more concrete to you, I think. So here we have the composition, right? We have the original source image, the detail that I shot in order to create the composition. I will mention the building and the architect. Just for you probably know some of these buildings. The first images are all from New York, and you will see how the series transitions through the various architectural styles that are predominant in each city, because the city becomes, as I traveled, as the world opened up again. At first, I was really just shooting in my little area of Manhattan. And then the pandemic began to ease, and I had access to other locations. I got invited back to the UAE. I was able to travel again. So you start to see other cities appearing in you know, with their own architectural styles. So this one, of course, is Zaha Hadid, one of my favorite architects. This is her condo building on West 28th Street in Manhattan. I do want to point out, I have never shown the original images to anyone. You're the first group. I really didn't want to demystify the series too much, if you get my drift, but I think as architects, you probably will find it fascinating to see what emerged. Some will be much more obvious to you from the beginning, and some you will never be able to tell what the original source image is. I'm also going to include close-ups. This series, you have to keep in mind, is extremely detailed. All my work is like this. It's kind of my hallmark as a photographer. I'm completely into the details, into a very large scale. I'm kind of drawing people into the images, and you do that with scale. These were all captured with a medium format camera, the new Fuji 100 megapixel. It's actually 102 megapixels. I typically work with a tripod, not always, but I got used to that during my career, shooting mostly architecture, so it helps a lot to capture this resolution and to keep everything perfectly sharp. This one is Metropolis Abstracted number 3. This is Lantern House in Chelsea. This is a Thomas Heatherwick building. The original image is a close-up of the windows, which I find fascinating. I think that some of these, you'll see the linearity of New York, right? The buildings in New York tend not to be too curvaceous, at least not yet. But the sensation that you get from some of these images, especially when you zoom in, you can really interpret them in a lot of different ways. I mean, if you ask me, this one is kind of Teutonic or Celtic, or there's some kind of warrior thing going on in this, which really doesn't relate what's in any way to the original image. So it has its own persona, and each image is like that. This is a close-up from Metropolis Abstracted number 3. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 4. This is 15 Hudson Yards, and the architect is Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. These early images from New York ended up having a bit of an Art Deco feeling to them, as I mentioned in the video, especially number 4 and number 5, which you'll see. The underlying images are not Deco in the slightest. It's really mirrored facades, but the outcome seems to be. And I find that very interesting, since New York, of course, has such a strong association with Art Deco. Number 4 is probably also the best example of how the resulting image can be much stronger than the original detail. This is number 5, also 15 Hudson Yards. It continues the link to New York Deco, perhaps even more strongly with the dart pattern that emerges in the center element. Was this intentional on my part? Not really, no, I can't take credit for that, but perhaps the mind sees what the eyes do not yet perceive. I think number 5 has a certain restrained elegance, and that's why I like it. It's very controlled, but it's also a very interesting image. Here's some close-ups. Metropolis Abstracted number 6. This is also Hudson Yards. A few of the compositions start to have a little bit of a sci-fi look. This one reminds me of a kind of Japanese samurai helmet, as I mentioned in the video. I don't know why, I guess the face emerges. The interesting thing here is that it's another view of the same building we saw previously, but the time of day, the color of the light, the angle captured make for a radically different final composition. This one started to pick up a purplish blue. It has a totally different feeling. You could see the original source image on the left. The original image is absolutely interesting on its own. Here's close-up. Another close-up. I hope these close-ups are informative. So you could, my intent is to give you a sensation of what it would be like to stand actually in front of the artwork at a large scale. Does everybody recognize this building? Please raise your hand. This is Grimshaw. This is Fulton Center in Manhattan. This is perhaps one of the simpler compositions because it's based on a circle. So you're somewhat limited when you have a circular shape in what you can do, how far you can push it. And also some of the compositions are better left simpler. Some you can really mirror them. Others are actually stronger the less you do. And this is one of them. I did like how the mirroring here gives the image a kind of surreal feeling to it. It's as if you know something out of the ordinary is happening, but you really just can't put your finger on it. So I think also this one works really well because it was a blue sky day, and the blue sky is kind of painting the interior of the conical structure. I don't know what you call it, the oculus, kind of with the blue, cyan, and green tones. I've seen, actually, putting this together on your website, other photos of this, and they just had a more silvery tone. So I'm really not sure how this ended up with such strong blue, but I suspect it's the sky that colorized it. I think also if there had been clouds, it might not be such an interesting composition because it would be very busy. Here's a close-up view. This is the Oculus, Lower Manhattan, Santiago Calatrava. This is probably the most popular and easily recognized building in New York of the entire series. The composition, again, is very simple here, but the ethereal feeling that results is quite interesting. Again, it reminds me a bit of Deco with the repeated diminishing darts that are entering from both sides. Here's close-up detail. This is the original image. So this one, you see, you have the architecture pointing from one side, and you have there's a lot going on. There's two buildings, and there are reflections as well. So all of that enters into the equation. This is Essex Market. This is Shop Architects. It's in the Lower East Side. Metropolis Abstracted number 10 is also quite a simple composition. It ended up being a lot of people's favorite in the exhibition that you saw earlier. I think it's that's because even though the composition is based on a static photo, it becomes quite dynamic in the final image. You really can't quite put your finger on it. I mean, is there a face emerging here? Is it a transformer? Is it an alien ship? You don't really know what's going on. This is a close-up view of composition. And that's the original image, which is quite simple. I actually grabbed this one. I was working with my fine art printer, and I was walking down the street heading toward the train. And I saw this, I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. I like the kind of crenellation going on here, if that's the correct term. And so I really had no idea that it would end up being one of the most popular. Again, we're back to Hudson Yards. This is number 11, Metropolis Abstracted. This is probably the single most admired piece of the entire series. It got the most attention. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but people tend to project a lot onto this photo. I personally find the triangular shape in the center a bit mesmerizing. It draws you in. It's kind of like a portal to another dimension. And I think that's probably what other people are feeling when they look at it. It has a bit of a spiritual connotation to some people, and I heard that more than once in the exhibition of the artwork. Again, I'd like to take credit for all that, but I'm not a painter. I didn't paint this. I simply captured it and turned it into what it had the potential to become. The original image is that left, so you might find that very interesting. That's the shed. Here are some details. We're back at the Oculus. This composition is based entirely on reflections now. So most of them are architectural details. A lot of them are reflections of architecture. So if I had to choose one from the series that's my own personal favorite, it's this one, number 12, Metropolis Abstracted. It's something about the palette of deep blues and baby blues combined with the shade of white, gray, and black. I think it definitely has connotations of rippling water, and it vaguely references maybe Japanese prints. That's the sensation I get from it. It'll be interesting to see the close-ups. This is the center. And here's another close-up. So this one has a certain sensuality to it, which I find very appealing. This is the original image. This one, people like the original image so much, I actually sell it as art on its own. It's quite interesting. So it's pure reflection. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 13. Now, if anyone wants me to slow down or go back, I can go back and show things. It's not a problem at all. I don't know if I'm going too quickly, but so this type of image is a bit of a risk as a photographer. I had to think whether I wanted to use this or whether it was simply too complicated, too fussy. With photography, there's a strong push towards reductive work and minimalism for such a long time that it's a little bit of a risk to make complex imagery like this. But my work has always been informed by painting a lot. And this image is, in particular, is a more painterly image. I had a realization in creating the series that this was really more contemporary art than just straight photography. And I just should be confident and put it all out there. Let people make their own determination, whether they thought it was fascinating, whether they thought it was fussy, what they projected onto it. And I don't control it. That's not to say that every image makes it in. I've definitely zapped probably many more than made it into the series. And so, as I said at the beginning, it's a process of iteration. Some of the details that I captured with glee, thinking that it was going to be a home run, didn't work. No matter how hard I tried, it didn't work. And, you know, that's part of the process. You have to edit out your images and see what's weak and what's strong. And I'm sure that's the same with architectural firms as well, with your designs. So these are the details. This is the original image. It's a combination of buildings, modern, Art Deco, and a reflection. The reds are coming in from that strong. This must have been at, yeah, it is. It's at dusk. So you had the sunset bouncing off the reflection, the building that's reflected on the right. And you have the lights already on in the Art Deco, the older building on the left, which I believe is Deco, looks like Deco. And then you have all the glass towers. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 14. This is also one of my personal favorites. This is 100 Norfolk Street in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. The Lower East Side has emerged to have some of the most interesting buildings in Manhattan these days. The architect is Oda or ODA. I'm not sure if it's how it's. So number 14 is perhaps the most successful of the entire series when looked at from a perspective of transformation. You simply cannot decipher that this originates from an architectural detail. The golden light emanating from the center and a vaguely crucifix-like shape, none of this was intentional. This is just what emerged. And you can see the original building at left, which had some interesting reflections of another building. So it's really multi-layered. It's the reflections, it's the texture of the facade, it's the sky, all of it works together. Here you can see close-ups. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 16. This is called Blue Tower. I found out recently, I really didn't know the name of this building. It's Bernard Tschumi. It's also on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Like number 13, I rather had doubts about number 16. I love the original image. I love the facade. I find it so playful and creative and kind of humorous. But I wasn't sure if I could work it into the series, and that's because the facade is already so patterned and kind of so busy that it really could make for something that's a little too complicated. But in turning it into the final image, it became this kind of kaleidoscopic effect. You've got this gorgeous cyan, vivid color. It's very complex and needs to be kind of seen close up, which we're going to do here. This is probably the most kaleidoscopic of all of the series. This is number 17. This is Studio Gang. This is in Chelsea in Manhattan. Solar Carve, the building is called. I don't know how it got that name, but Number 17 is one of my personal favorites. It's vaguely scientific in feeling and immerses the viewer in a deep shade of royal blue and an almost molecular-like structure in line and shape. I have to thank the architect for that, because the building kind of has that feeling on its own, as you could see on the left. It's a very interesting design. Here's close-up view. Close-up views, I think, are really important because you can see the fine lines. You can see really exactly what's going on in the image. You can't see that online. So this type of series doesn't necessarily come across completely just looking on websites and things like that. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 18. This is based on Via 57 by Bjarke Ingels. It's again on the west side. This is West Midtown Manhattan. Number 18 is complex and rather hard to decipher when seen small on screen. It's visual overload, which is exactly what it's intended to be. When seen close up, however, it's a completely different story. Again, you see a vaguely Art Deco pattern seem to emerge, which I love. And I really like thinking that my contemporary photography series harkens back to the history of New York and exalts it. You can see here, close-up view. This one's interesting as well. If you look at the bottom of this, you could see somebody had like a rack of shirts in their window. So you get a hint of people's existence. This is an occupied building. This is not just like a rendering, you know. People are living here. And since there are so many windows, you get a little glimpse of everybody's life in this building, and it contributes to the series. This is the original image. You can see the windows here a little more. You can see people's stuff in them. All right, so now we moved on to Boston. We're out of New York. This is Frank Gehry. This is Data Center at MIT, Metropolis Abstracted number 20. I think here the windows really made for the interesting composition because they're bouncing the blue from the sky. So you get these vivid blues. You also have a color contrast with the brick-like. I don't know if it's tile or brick that he used. I'd have to see it closer, but it has a brick-like color. And so you get this painterly effect. I think this one is very painterly, where you have the color contrasts working with each other. Here's close up. This is also Data Center at MIT, Frank Gehry. You can see here that I include this because it's an example how the change in angle, the change in the time of day, completely changed the tonality and the look of the image. So I think the titanium skin that he uses, the kind of brushed titanium skin, has a lot to do with that because it's reflecting so much of the color from the surrounding area. These compositions have a very dynamic feeling to them, particularly this one. The shapes seem to float and almost dematerialize in front of your eyes. And I heard that a lot when people were standing in front of this, that the shapes seem to be dancing, which is kind of nice to hear as the photographer. The original image there is at left, and it's quite a beautiful image on its own. So here we have close-up details. The center. So now we've moved to Dubai. You can tell that the color palette has shifted. It's become more vibrant. You're seeing bright pops of orange, which you don't typically see in New York. And so this is SLS Dubai Hotel by Aedas Architects. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, A-E-D-A-S. So this one caught my eye as I was driving by. I think if I remember correctly, it was still under construction at the time. That was 2022, early 2022. We stopped the car and I had an impromptu shoot right on the spot because I thought this one would probably work really well for the series. I love the dynamism of this photo, the color contrasts against the field of white, but I think you're really going to see what's going on here. So you take mundane balconies and they become something a little more interesting. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 24. We've moved now to the Dubai Expo, the World Expo. This is the Azerbaijani pavilion from the architect. It's called Symmetrico. It sounds Italian. I'm not sure if they're Italian, but that's the first time I've heard of this room. They did a real bang-up job with this pavilion. It was fascinating. Here, you can see the first example of me including an organic texture. The front element of the pavilion was made of cedar wood, which is, I guess, a predominant in Azerbaijan, so they used a local element. You can see the wood grain all throughout. The expo really offered such an opportunity to capture extremely creative and more curvaceous elements. It was a feast for the eyes, to be honest with you. It was my first World Expo. I missed Milan. I intended to go, but I didn't get there. So it was very interesting, and really, they put a lot of resources into it. It was fascinating. This is also an example of I love the original image, but I was concerned that it would not work for the series because of the predominant wood grain. I decided to move forward with it anyway, because the series really should be about texture as much as it is about color and form. Here you can see close-ups. This is the original image. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 25. This is also at the Dubai Expo. It's Foster and Partners. It was called Aleph Pavilion. Once again, curves of texture predominate. Color becomes more intense here. The metallic facade, it was left a kind of chrome shiny by the architect. So there are lots of specular reflections in this one, which is unique. I captured this one at night also, which is why the color palette is more intense. The whole thing has a kind of Wizard of Oz feeling to it, at least to me. It's a huge contrast to the more reserved colors of New York and London. This is the original image. This building was really something to behold, especially at night. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 28. This is Zaha Hadid again. This is called Opus Dubai. Everybody in the Dubai office, I'm sure, knows this building. This is another example of a composition mostly based on reflections on a glass facade, but this time the facade is a smoky black. This was captured at dusk, so you start to see the sky and the clouds contributing the rosy colors in the composition. You can see that at left a little more, with the sky being bounced off the facade. This one really surprised me, as it clearly revealed something organic in nature. I personally saw a skull. Others saw an insect, maybe a praying mantis. I thought hard about including this one, whether it should be included in the series at all, because it might be perceived as trying to resort to gimmicks of some kind, visually. But in the end, I decided to include it because each composition kind of lives on its own and expresses something about the original design. But more than anything else, it should express spontaneity. The element of surprise is kind of paramount here, and that's what also adds interest to the series. So I figured, take it or leave it. Some people love this one, some people don't. It's all on them. This is a close-up view. I think the close-up view really is kind of self-explanatory. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 30. This is the Germany pavilion at the Expo, Lava Architects. One of the few examples of a mostly white design used as the basis for a composition. This is another great example of how the underlying image sometimes gets completely lost in the final composition. This one, again, belongs kind of in the futuristic camp with a few of the others. What little color was in the original photo converged towards the center, which makes it look like it's emanating from within. It's a good place to point out that I tried several designs for many of these. This one had 3 or 4 iterations, in fact. I was not happy with any of them. When I came back, I made one more pass. So I tend to do this as a photographer. I set things aside for a while. I get onto other projects. I'm not happy with something. I've learned to just put it aside, walk away. come back to it another time when you have fresh eyes. Don't just keep hammering away at the same thing if it's not working. So I came back quite a bit later and I made one more pass and I got this and I was happy with it. Here's a detail. Notice the infrastructure at the bottom. This is one thing I really love about the series, that it kind of transforms into something abstract, but at the same time, you see the original elements of the building. They feature prominently when you see it close up. So you have this kind of joint structure. I'm not exactly sure of the support structure of the pavilion connecting to the beams. All of that I think is really interesting because it pulls you back to reality in a sense. Here's another detail. Here's the original image. Again, the Germany pavilion at the, I don't know how many of you went to the expo, but had some very interesting architecture. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 32. This was captured now in Sharjah, not in Dubai. This is a detail from a monument at one of the new buildings there. Sharjah's really making an effort to put up some interesting new architecture. The exhibition that you saw earlier is in Sharjah. It's the largest photography exhibition in the world. If you ever get a chance, please do go. You're going to see the most spectacular examples of photography. You won't be able to believe it. Mine was at the front of the pavilion, which they didn't tell me until I arrived in the UAE. I had Steve McCurry next to me at the front of the pavilion. I had a photojournalist facing me. I had kind of photographers focusing on animal life. We had photographers focusing on tribes in the Arctic. We had all kinds of interesting things. My series was the only kind of abstract architectural based so it lended a little bit of, a little bit of a different perspective. So back to this image, I really love this one so much. It's the most overtly romantic image in the series. I think I don't need to explain to you why. It's the soft color palette, the intertwining nature of the curves. It reminds me a bit of a George O'Keeffe painting. The original image is at left. Oh, one funny story about this. I actually had to trespass to get this image. The image you see at left, I had to enter the monument and let me go back and stand inside to get this view, which is not permitted at all, but they didn't catch me. So this is Metropolis Abstracted number 33. This is Abu Dhabi now, Foster and Partners. This is in Masdar. I don't know if any of you have been to Masdar, but it's very interesting, very cool place. This reflects a more muted color palette and the convergence of lines and angles of the two distinct buildings that were included in the original image. It also captures a hint of the blue sky, which adds some color contrast. This is the original image. I love the tones used in this building, so soft and creamy, and it clearly is intended to refer back to the surrounding desert environment, and it does it very well. So we're at the last image now. This is Metropolis Abstracted number 34. I have not shown you the entire series. That would take a long time. I've just selected a good number of them, but this is number 34 is the last of the series. This is London. This is actually a reflection. This is the Lloyd's building reflected on Willis building, so Foster and Partners, because he designed both buildings. So I really haven't had too much time to incorporate a lot of work from London into Metropolis Abstracted yet, because I focused on other series while I was shooting there. But I found this one very interesting due to all the layers of reflected details. Kind of has a hall of mirrors type effect. This one definitely falls into the futuristic camp as well. And so this is the original image. At this point, I feel satisfied with 34 large-scale pieces that I could probably end the series at this point. I don't tend to make hard decisions on that. They can go on for years, but I'm satisfied with this series. I don't feel like it has a huge a huge amount more to say than what's already been said with 34 pieces. But if the right thing comes along, I'm sure I'll incorporate it into the series. So moving on, I just wanted to show you quickly. I don't know, I don't have a timer here, so I don't know exactly how far we are. It's 9 o'clock, so we're doing okay. Some publications and awards for the series. The series went on to have some wins of its own, in addition to Gary's Children and my other series in the past. This is the Neutral Density Photography Awards from Neutral Density magazine. The series was selected as a winning entry at American Photography 37. It was also selected for honorable mentions at International Photography Awards and other places. It's been published numerous times. This is an art magazine called Lens from Israel. They did a beautiful spread of this in English. You can see all of this on my website as well. I have an extensive selection of publications. It links back to the original article as long as it's not behind a paywall, or you can see the screenshots of the articles as well. This is Digital Photographer out of the UK. They included this and another series that's kind of similar. It's called Sylvan Landscapes. Medium Format magazine. This is a very well-regarded magazine for photographers. Did a spread just on this. This is Wide Walls Art magazine. They did an incredible write-up and an interview with me. I referred to it earlier. Elianapour is the writer. That's linked from my website. If you have a chance, it's very insightful. This is ASMP, American Society of Media Photographers. They did a story on the exhibition. Those of you in the UAE might know Selections Arts magazine. They covered the exhibition as well. And we're at the end. Here are my contacts and my socials. Following on Instagram is always appreciated, or whichever social you use, LinkedIn. And please do visit the website if you get a chance. My email is there if anybody wants to contact me. And that's it. So now I guess we have the question and answer portion, correct, Jasper?
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you
All right.
very much.
I'm going to turn my camera back on. Can you see me?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. And I think I have to stop sharing, correct? Yes. There we are. All right.
No, first of all, thank you very much, because I think we saw many magnificent images that I hadn't seen before. So that's fantastic. Is there anyone online or in the room that has a question to Andrew?
Someone must have it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Someone must have a question.
Maybe to kick it off, like how long does it usually take for you to make a composition like that? Because it seems like a lot of work. Some of those.
Yeah, it is, and I started discussing that more in my opening commentary, but I really wanted to get to the examples of the images more than anything. I mean, this kind of series, all these fine art series, are a labor of love. I'm sure many of you have also an outside art form that you're working on. A lot of architects do, whether it's photography or painting or drawing, and you undertake these things basically because it stimulates you. And I mean, the predominant things that I sell and make a living as a photographer are representational work. So, either architectural photography or cityscapes or landscapes, beautiful things that people want to put in their home. The undertaking a series like this, the more conceptual work, is a decision that you make to put in the time and the effort, and it's a lot of time and effort, and it lasts over a long period of time. So each one, some occur in a more rapidly, others take multiple iterations before you're happy with it. I should point out, like any other body of work, you have to take many more images than you end up working with. So you see the small amount of architectural details here. there are many, many, many more that didn't work out, that I didn't use, that I didn't think were strong enough. So it's a commitment. It's definitely a commitment. I mean, this has started in May of 2020. It's still going. And so at some point, I'll probably wind it down because I have other series that I've started in the meantime, and I don't want to really divide my time too much. I tend to like to focus on a series for a while and while you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I saw on your website you have quite distinct styles. Like this one was super interesting, but you have many other interesting styles of series. What is the process of thinking up of them? Like, do you just look at a lot of images or art, or
Well, I definitely take inspiration from other photographers. Like I mentioned, painting is a big inspiration for me, always has been since the beginning. I mean, I should point out that when I moved to New York to start graduate school at 20, my first job was at the Metropolitan Museum. I really don't get into all of that, but I was kind of immersed in painting, and it was a complete education. My background was not in art. I don't have a degree in photography or architecture. My degree is in political science and government. And so the Metropolitan Museum was really a teacher, and it completely changed my perspective in life. That's when I got my first camera. And then when I first became obsessed with photography, and I never looked back. So it's hard to say that my work directly references paintings, but I always have a lot of painting in mind. Maybe, to be honest with you, I really shouldn't say it because the photographer's meant, but more than photography. So I draw from a lot of sources. Some of the series are directly inspired by nature. I would say if you look, there are two series that are based on negative imagery, and they're called inverted. One is inverted UAE, the other one's inverted New York. One is black and white, one is color. That's a kind of a more risque series, and that, I'll be honest with you, I was in the 1990s printing what I was shooting in Europe. I lived in Europe for a couple of years. I spent a lot of time shooting, and I would have the lab print it as negatives on deposit paper. So the image would be negative. And then I would cut them up, and I would paste, and I would make kind of this weird montage of negative images. And my friends would, I was living in Athens for a while in Greece, and my friends would visit from New York. They were like, what? This is cool, but what is it that you're spending your time doing in Athens? And I was kind of, obsessed with that. So it really is a long process because it's a return back to my kind of obsession with negative imagery, but carried out in a new age with new technological abilities. And so.
I think Cal posted something. Cal, do you want to mute yourself and read it out loud, or?
No. Yeah, I just noticed the faces and human figures. I'm curious if that's like a goal you're going through, or just kind of a happy accident.
That's a good question. Yeah, I kind of referred back to that when I was showing some of the close-ups. That is, I cannot take credit for it. That is completely the happy accident. It's a surprise to me. That's why I had a section called the element of surprise, because it really brings some of these images to life, and people project what they want onto it. People see all kinds of things. So as the artist, it's fascinating, especially to see it in exhibition or to hear comments of what other people see, because a lot of times they see things that I never saw. Very interesting to me. And it's just, the process of mirroring reveals that. I'd refer back to another series on my website called Sylvan Landscapes, which is based on trees. They're treescapes. And it becomes even more apparent because the source is organic. And so you see all kinds of, it's just really, when you see the really large prints, you see faces, you see, all kinds of animals and little creatures dance. And people see it. People see it. As human beings, we are designed to decipher patterns and to project, I think, other type of organic things, to perceive it immediately. That's how our brains are trained in dealing with each other as human beings. And so people pull that out of the image. And I would love to take credit for it. but I can't because it was an unintended consequence of these series. I have to say that as a photographer, that's probably what motivated me to continue with these series, because they were just so fun. And it becomes a kind of a relaxation for me to step away from producing like very large scale cityscapes, which are a lot of work to produce it. And, you know, I've done that for years. This is the more fun element of what I'm producing.
Yeah, fantastic. Is there anyone else just keeping an eye on time? Otherwise, thank you very much, Andrew, again, for taking the time for us. And if you're ever in
Thank
London,
you.
please visit
Thanks
us.
again to you and to Claudia for inviting